Syrians gear up for the first multi-candidate presidential elections, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. Mahmoud Abbas hails the end of Palestinian division after swearing in a new consensus government. Ongoing clashes in eastern Ukraine between Kiev's troops and pro-Russian activists leave a dozen people dead. And a visit by Kuwait's Emir to Tehran opens a new chapter in relations between Iran and the Arab monarchies in the Persian Gulf. Hello there, you're watching Al Ittijah World News and I'm Fatma Basim. Syria's first ever multi-candidate presidential elections are set to kick off tomorrow across the war-torn country. The three hopeful competitors include incumbent President Bashar Hafiz al-Assad, Hassan Abdullah al-Nouri and Maher Abdul Hafiz Hajjar. Bashar Hafiz al-Assad is, of course, the current president of Syria. He is also the general secretary of the Ba'ath Party and the regional secretary of the party's branch in Syria. Assad came to power in 2000 and is widely expected to secure a third term in office. Another candidate is Hassan Abdullah al-Nouri. He has a PhD in general management from John F. Kennedy University and he was the secretary of the Damascus Chamber of Industry. From 1997 to 2000. From 2000 to 2002, he served as the Minister of State for Administrative Development Affairs, and he is currently the head of the National Initiative for Administration and Change in Syria. Then there is Maher Abdul Hafiz Hajjar. He joined the Syrian Communist Party in 1984. He withdrew from the party in 2000 and formed a temporary leadership for Aleppo's communists. During the crisis in Syria, he ran for the parliamentary elections in 2012 for the city of Aleppo within the list of the Popular Front for Change and secured a seat.
The process of the presidential elections in Syria is in full swing, as millions across the country are gearing up to take part in the first multi-candidate polls on Tuesday. Syria's divided opposition and their foreign backers have been watching in disbelief, as the Damascus government gears up for an election to give Syrian President Bashar al-Assad another presidential mandate despite the ongoing violence. The vote, which the government said it can only hold on territory it controls, signals confidence by Assad and his allies that they will win the war.
We are confident that Dr. Bashar al-Assad will win the elections. He is the sole protector of Syria and we need him to continue fighting terrorism.
Fighting terrorism was one of Assad's main election campaigning slogans, as well as rebuilding the country and fighting corruption. Three issues which Syrians believe their leader can achieve after the polls are held on Tuesday.
We know for a fact that Dr. Bashar al-Assad will keep his promise. He will fight terrorism, rebuild the country, and make sure corruption does not exist. We want a strong president.
Abu Muhammad, who owns a small coffee shop and a mini market outside the University of Damascus, says his main concern is security, which he believes can only be achieved through ballot boxes.
I will take part in the presidential elections. We as Damascus residents want peace and security. That, in my opinion, will only come after the polls are held. And when Dr. Bashar al-Assad wins, the situation will be better.
Now, as Syrians across the war-torn country prepare to take part in the country's first multi-candidate election in over 50 years, many are hoping that the elections will be a way out from the crisis that has claimed thousands of innocent lives. After almost 4 years of a bloody conflict that has thus far claimed more than 160,000 lives, Syrians are now hoping that through these elections, peace and stability will once again return to their war-wrecked country. In the Syrian capital of Damascus, Hussein al-Musawi, Al Ittijah TV.
Oh, later on, we'll be discussing the Syrian elections with our correspondent, Hussein al-Musawi. As the Iraqi army continues its full-scale military operation in the western city of Fallujah against militants belonging to the Al-Qaeda offshoot of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, our correspondent Wissam Al-Bayati was able to get exclusive access to the conflict-ridden city.
Hello, and you are more than welcome to join us in this tour as we have been escorted by the Iraqi army to go to the forward operation military base where the latest military confrontation has been taking place. In fact, where we will be escorted by the Iraqi army after getting the permissions from the top commanders who are actually operating the Iraqi army in this area. You are more than welcome to join us, and let's go. This place is the latest place that the Iraqi army has actually got during a fight that lasted more than 72 hours. The Iraqi army right now is controlling this place as the war still continued. The confrontation is still underway. So far, the Iraqi army, and according to the statement of the latest development made by the Iraqi army, which was actually mentioned by the top Iraqi security officers, the Iraqi army has killed more than 40 ISIL members and have captured tens of them. In addition to the progress of the Iraqi army that has been achieved in this place is considered remarkable, as the description of the Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, who stated that the Iraqi army is doing an extraordinary efforts to control this area and to expel the militants from this place and to have them surrounded inside the city of Fallujah to wipe them out and finish the terrorism in Iraq.
Let's cross over now to Wissam, who's standing by for us in the western city of Fallujah. Wissam, tell us more about the Iraqi army's military advancements in Fallujah.
Yes, in fact, after the multiple military operations in the outskirts of the city of Fallujah, and after regaining a wide range of territories from the ISIL militants, the Iraqi Defense Ministry have actually sent reinforcement for the troops that actually has been operating in the outskirts of the city of Fallujah to replace the soldiers who are going to move forward to maintain the progress and maintain regaining the other territories which have actually been occupied by the ISIL members. According to the Defense Ministry, and the spokesperson of the Iraqi Defense Ministry stated that the militants, most of the militants who are actually fighting the Iraqi army have either been killed or captured, or a few amounts of these militants have actually succeeded in escaping the battlefield and going backward to their bases. And according to the leaked reports and the intelligence reports, they say that these people who have actually withdrew or escaped from the battlefield has been executed inside their bases as a punishment for their retreatment. Yes.
Yes, Wissam, if you could give us an estimate of the number of militants still in the city.
According to the reports that has been actually leaked from inside, and the intels which comes from inside the city of Fallujah, and basing on the intelligence reports, which actually the Iraqi Defense Ministry has prepared, the number of residents in the city of Fallujah are on the lowest level, and at the same time most of the houses are evacuated and empty, and only the militants who are occupying the empty houses and the evacuated areas. In addition to the people who have actually fled the city of Fallujah to the other parts of the country, such as Baghdad, Hilla, even Kurdistan, have actually been well protected, according to the Defense Ministry, who stated actually that the required steps and all the required measures have been put in place to protect the people who fled the city of Fallujah to seek a safe sanctuary for their family members and for themselves. Yes.
Yes, and where are most of these militants going? Won't they pose a threat to other areas in Iraq?
To be honest with you, according to the information that the Iraqi defense has, the militants who have actually been attempting to escape the city of Fallujah, to flee the country to other provinces or even other parts of the country, have actually been either, as I mentioned, captured or hunted down by the Iraqi Air Force. But at the same time, the militants, and according to the Iraqi Defense Ministry and the commander of the joint military operations in the city of Fallujah, he stated that the Iraqi army is well sealing the outskirts of the city of Fallujah, and at the same time he is conducting multiple military operations in the outskirts and even in the areas that witnessing a presence for these militants to actually to surround them in one place, and as I mentioned, to conduct a unique, according to his description, a unique military operation which comes and which considers as a first of its kind, logically and even in the logistic preparations, even with the performance and even the equipment that is going to be used during this military operation, which comes according to his statement, which will bring the end for the presence of the militants, at least in Fallujah in particular and in general in Iraq. Yes.
Yes, but why have the operations in Anbar and Fallujah to root out ISIL militants taken so long?
To be honest with you, in the very beginning, I would like to tell you that today there was a press conference the tribal leaders in the city of Fallujah held with the presence of the top Iraqi security officials who were actually present in this press conference. And during the press conference, the tribal leaders have actually sworn that they will be protecting the Iraqi people in the city of in the province of Anbar, and they will put their hands or they will join their hands with the Iraqi army to protect the people and to expel the militants. But at the same time, the militants are adopting a new strategy, which is trying to distract the Iraqi army in different areas, such as according to the leaked information from the Defense Ministry, they say that the number of attacks has actually risen in different parts of the city of Ramadi and in the escalated or scattered villages in the city of Ramadi, in an attempt to distract the Iraqi army from the outskirts of the city of Fallujah, and at least to have or to force some parts of these units which actually located in the outskirts of Fallujah to leave this place, and to weaken the presence of the Iraqi army in the outskirts of the city of Fallujah. But at the same time, this kind of tricks, according to the commander of the Joint Operations Center or Military Operations Center in Fallujah, will not apply on the Iraqi army, and they have already put in place some preparations, and the required measures have been taken, especially with the Iraqi Air Force, which plays a very important role in this regard, to hunt down the militants who have actually fled and successfully escaped the city of Fallujah to the other parts of the country, especially the scattered villages in the city of Fallujah. Yes.
All right, thank you for that update. That was Wissam Al-Bayati, our correspondent in Fallujah. Meanwhile, militants attacks across Iraq, including in the normally peaceful south, killed 9 people after unrest a day earlier left 40 dead. The violence comes as political leaders jostle to build alliances amid what is expected to be a months-long period of government formation following the April's legislative elections, with bloodletting at its worst since Iraq emerged from 8 years of US occupation. And following a period of relative calm in the area, the Turkish military shelled a village in Iraq's autonomous northern Kurdish region. The target of the shelling was not immediately clear, and there were no reports of casualties. However, in the past, Turkish forces have targeted the Kurdistan Workers' Party. The PKK declared a truce with Ankara in March 2013. But the peace process stalled in September when the PKK announced they were suspending their retreat from Turkish soil, accusing the government of failing to deliver on promised reforms. Well, elections are the epitome of democracy by world standards, but when it comes to Syria, the West looks bent on undermining presidential elections that will most likely see President Bashar al-Assad serve another term. Recent events in Lebanon, where the Western-backed March 14th coalition has voiced its opposition to the expats vote, exemplifies these efforts to delegitimize the Syrian elections.
83 kilometers away from Damascus, hundreds of thousands of Syrian voters poured into the Syrian embassy in Lebanon to take part in the democratic process that would alter their country's political future days before the presidential elections began back home. Yet the distance between Damascus and Beirut couldn't stretch any farther away. The Lebanese Interior Ministry, held by the US-backed March 14th coalition, has decided to revoke the refugee status from Syrians who have traveled back home. Syria's Information Minister, Amran al-Zobi, criticized the decision made by Interior Minister Nuhad Mashnouk, who claimed that security concerns prompted the government to pass the law. Although Lebanese authorities dismissed allegations that the decision was related to the massive turnout of voters who pledged to vote for President Bashar al-Assad, the March 14th alliance had openly demanded the expulsion of Syrian refugees. Not only has the anti-Damascus coalition opposed elections being held in the Syrian embassy, but have in fact rejected presidential elections in Syria. The same group had called for Western-led military intervention in Syria under the pretext of holding the best interest of those refugees at heart. Yet efforts to delegitimize the Syrian elections in Lebanon are only a miniature account of a broader international scheme. The West has been calling for democratic elections in Syria for years, and when the day finally came, it took to denouncing the vote and even prevented Syrian expats from voting. Countries such as France, Germany, and Belgium, as well as the UAE and Saudi Arabia, have banned Syrian elections from taking place on their territories. Western powers, mainly the US, claims that elections in Syria won't be valid, considering that many areas are too violence-stricken to participate, and thus will not be representative of the entire population. Here is where a question can be raised. Didn't Washington support elections in Ukraine, where the pro-Russian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk boycotted the vote? And wasn't the Western-backed government in Kiev a product of an illegitimate coup? The difference, it seems, is that elections in Ukraine brought a pro-Western president to power, while the Syrian elections will most likely see President Bashar al-Assad serve another term.
Meanwhile, at least 54 people have been killed in 2 days of militant attacks against government-held areas in Syria's Aleppo. This as militant groups continue their campaign of terror in the run-up to Tuesday's presidential election in the hope of disrupting those polls.
Just a day before the country's presidential election, Syria's militant groups have stepped up attacks against government-held areas. The opposition-backed Syrian Observatory for Human Rights declared that the death toll from 2 days of militant attacks on Aleppo in the north of the country has reached at least 54. 4 people were killed earlier on Monday in militant mortar and rocket fire after 50 civilians, including 9 children, were killed over the weekend. Meanwhile, in the central province of Homs, state television reported that terrorists killed at least 10 people and caused major collateral damage to houses when a bomb-laden tanker truck exploded in the village of Haraki, another region regarded as a stronghold of the Syrian government. Meanwhile, the Al-Qaeda offshoot of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant extremist group, ISIL, on Thursday kidnapped more than 150 Kurdish high school students as they were returning home from the city of Aleppo in the north. ISIL was once welcomed by other militant groups fighting against Assad's government, but gained their wrath because of their quest for hegemony and systematic abuses in a 3-year war that has left tens of thousands killed and nearly half the population forced to flee their homes.
Let's go back to our correspondent Sen Al-Moussawi, who's standing by for us in Damascus to discuss more on the Syrian presidential elections. Sen, if you could tell us more about the security measures being taken for these elections.
Yes, Fatimi, I was on the streets of Damascus today and I was able to witness on first hand all the security measures that were taken by the Syrian army. Yes, the Syrian army has beefed up the security measures. They're deployed in and around Damascus. There are many hundreds of checkpoints in and around Damascus. That's if I talk on the capital. They want to make sure that no attacks occur and that the voters can go and take part in the election safely. They're afraid because many are starting to talk about mortar attacks or car bombs occurring while the elections are taking place. So the Syrian army has beefed up their security measures inside the capital and also in many provinces inside Syria. I would like to say here that the Syrian people, I spoke to many today, and they really showed this kind of, they were very defiant, and they said that they wanted to go to the polling stations tomorrow and vote with their blood. They said that they are not afraid of the terrorist attacks inside Syria, and that they will go to the ballot boxes, and that they will participate heavily in the upcoming elections. So yes, the security measures are very high. I mean, it's only around 9 hours. 9 hours from today or 8 hours from now, and the ballot boxes will open, and we will see, and we will likely see a very high turnout, possibly a historic turnout in the first presidential elections, multi-candidate presidential elections, to be held in more than 50 years.
Yes, but Hassan, will this security plan that has been planned out by the Syrian army allow voters in militant-held areas to vote at all?
Well, you see, the Syrian army has already announced that the province of Raqqa, those living in the province of Raqqa, will not take part in this electoral process. We know also that parts of Aleppo, which are some parts, so we can say around 50% of Aleppo, which is under militant control, they will not also be able to take part in this democratic event. So what we know now, that Raqqa will not vote, all of Raqqa will not vote. Some parts of Deir ez-Zor, around 30% of Deir ez-Zor will not vote. 50% of Aleppo, unfortunately, won't be able to take part. And also some parts of the south, or those living in the south, in Dar'a, bordering Jordan, they will also not be able to take part in this historic event. We know until now, and this is figures that the Syrian government has given us, that around 4 to 5 million will not take part in this historic event. We know that around 18 to 19 million will take part, and which is around 80% of the Syrian population. So those living in militant-held areas, the Syrian army really gave them a chance. It told them that you can leave those areas and come to government-held areas, and you can take part in this event. However, those who stayed means that they took matters in their own hands, and they don't want to be part of this democratic process. So what we know now, around 75 to 80% of the population will vote tomorrow, and we are really bracing ourselves to see a historic turnout tomorrow.
Now, we saw several attacks across the country in Homs, Damascus, around Damascus and Aleppo. Will that be enough to prevent Syrians from voting, from what you're seeing?
Well, as I said before, I spoke to Syrians today. I spoke to dozens of Syrians, and I was able to, really speak to them and also feel their sorrow. And they all told us that. I mean, I was walking in Damascus today, and for those really who watch TV and see Damascus, everyone has this image that the residents of Damascus are not living safely, and that all the shops are closed, and that there are no taxis, and the restaurants are closing early. No, that's not the image in Damascus. People are defiant. People want to take part in these elections. Damascus residents, those who I spoke to, say that through their voices, through their ballot boxes, only then the security can be achieved. They believe that only if they take part in this democratic event, which is going to kick off at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, only then they can fix their country. Only then they can end corruption in the country. Only then they can give full support to President Bashar al-Assad to fight and to kick out terrorism from his country. So people, I mean, if I want to answer your question clearly, people are not afraid. I mean, if you go on the streets now, Damascus behind me, people are on the streets until 1, 2 p.m. There was people going around, decorated their cars, decorated their vans. They were all supporting President Bashar al-Assad. So when you really speak to Syrians, I mean, okay, if you want to read between the lines, maybe there is a sense of fear. I mean, there is a war in the country. Only 5-6 kilometers away from Damascus, there is militants. There is mortar shells landing in Damascus. However, despite all that violence, it seems that Syrians will heavily go into polling stations tomorrow to take part. They want to voice their message. They have a message they want to show the world. They have a message they want to show to the US, to the Western countries. They want to tell the world that we chose our president. We as Syrians, we don't need monitors. We don't need observers. Even if you say these elections are illegitimate. We want to go to the ballot boxes and we want to choose our president, a strong president who can defend Syria and hopefully kick out terrorism.
All right, Hussein, thank you for giving us the latest from Damascus.
Thank you.
You're watching Ali Tijah World News, still to come. Fresh clashes in Libya's Benghazi leave over 20 people dead and scores injured. Welcome back to Ali Tijah World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Syrians gear up for the first multi-candidate presidential elections, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. Mahmoud Abbas hails the end of Palestinian division after swearing in a new consensus government. Ongoing clashes in eastern Ukraine between Kiev's troops and pro-Russian activists leave a dozen people dead. And a visit by Kuwait's Emir to Tehran opens a new chapter in relations between Iran and the Arab monarchies in the Persian Gulf. A new Palestinian unity government has been sworn in following a reconciliation agreement between Fatah and Hamas that has infuriated the Israeli entity. Only hours before the new government took office in Ramallah, Israeli warplanes launched fresh airstrikes against the Gaza Strip.
Much to the chagrin of the Israeli entity, the two main Palestinian factions finally unveiled the lineup of a unity government as part of the recent reconciliation agreement between leaders of Fatah in the West Bank and their former rivals in the Hamas-run Gaza Strip. The technocratic government, which was sworn in before Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, comprises 17 ministers, 5 of whom are from Gaza, and will be tasked with organizing elections within 6 months. Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah will lead the cabinet, as well as take charge of the interior portfolio.
وبتشكيل حكومة التوافق الوطني.
Today, with the formation of a national consensus government, we announced the end of a Palestinian division that has greatly damaged our national cause. This black page in history has been turned forever.
وكان القرار هو أن نشكل.
Today, we are leaving this government after 7 years of steadfastness, during which we faced political and economic problems. We are leaving our chairs, but not our role. We are leaving willingly and in response to our national responsibilities.
The Zionist regime in Tel Aviv has called on the international community to boycott the new Palestinian government.
I call on all the responsible elements in the international community not to hurry and recognize a Palestinian government which includes Hamas or leaning on Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization which calls for the destruction of Israel, and the international community must not embrace it.
A united front between Palestinian foes turned friends is set to stand against the common enemy, but the Israeli entity is taking none of it and has already begun its reprisals. Only hours before the unveiling of the new cabinet, Israeli warplanes launched airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Israeli aircraft raided Palestinian resistance sites in Abu Jrad, north of Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, in the north, occupation forces confirmed targeting Syrian territories and declared the occupied Quneitra a closed military zone. No casualties have been reported in these attacks. The Israeli entity called off so-called peace talks, which were already faltering after the Palestinian leadership signed an accord with Hamas last April. Yet, payback for ending 7 years of divisions among Palestinians, it seems, is far from over.
Meanwhile, the US State Department said it will work with that Palestinian Unity government. Spokeswoman Jen Psaki stated that the State Department will continue to evaluate the policies of the new cabinet.
It appears that President Abbas has formed an interim technocratic government that does not include ministers affiliated with Hamas. Moving forward, we will be judging this government by its actions. Based on what we know now, we intend to work with this government, but we'll be watching closely to ensure that it upholds the principles that President Abbas reiterated today.
Tensions in the eastern region of Ukraine are still on the rise. In the latest wave of violence, at least 10 people were killed as Kiev continues its so-called anti-terrorist operations against pro-Russian activists.
The situation in the eastern region of Luhansk is worsening as ongoing clashes between the Ukrainian army and self-defense forces have left scores of people dead and wounded. According to pro-Russian activists, the Ukrainian military has killed at least 5 people in an airstrike on a government administrative building occupied by the activists. The following CCTV footage shows an explosion with debris scattered around the building while a couple of men were trying to move a body. A trail of blood led into the building where the remnants of an office smoldered. Many wounded were still trapped inside the administration headquarters, which caught fire. Reports said that the death toll may rise. The assault was followed by heavy gunfire on the ground, causing panic among civilians. The incident took place on the same day that the Ukrainian officials said pro-Russian activists attacked a border guard base in Luhansk. In the early morning hours of Monday, Ukrainian forces killed 5 activists, while repelling an attack by hundreds of pro-Russian separatists on a federal border guard camp in the east. The border guard service said 7 of its servicemen were wounded.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow will submit a draft resolution to the US Security Council calling for an immediate end to the violence in Ukraine.
The draft UN resolution will include demands for an immediate end to the violence and a start of actual negotiations with the aim of establishing a stable and reliable ceasefire. It will also include a demand for the creation, without delay, of humanitarian corridors through which peaceful civilians can leave combat zones if they wish.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin will hold talks over the Ukraine crisis with British Prime Minister David Cameron in France on Friday. The talks will take place on the same day after Cameron, US President Barack Obama, and other G7 leaders meet in Brussels for a summit at which Russia's position over the crisis in Ukraine will dominate the discussions. The Emir of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmad Jabir Al-Sabah, has wrapped up his two-day visit to the Islamic Republic. During the trip, Kuwait and Tehran signed 6 agreements, as Iranian officials stressed that a new chapter in relations between Iran and the Persian Gulf region has begun. Our Tehran correspondent Hussein Dabash has that story.
The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, has received the visiting Kuwaiti Emir, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmad Al-Jabir Al-Sabah, in the Iranian capital, Tehran. Sayyid Khamenei discussed a range of issues with the Kuwaiti leader, stressing that healthy relations with all countries in the region is in everyone's benefit. However, the supreme leader also mentioned that if a country does not comply with this principle and there are rifts between neighboring countries, then this undoubtedly will only serve the purpose of common enemies. The leader of the Islamic Revolution also pointed to the economic and trade developments between Iran and Kuwait and called for their expansion. The Kuwaiti Emir expressed his hope that this rare visit will signal the opening of a new chapter in relations between Tehran and Kuwait.
I think obviously the benefit is going to be mutual for both sides, but given the fact that if there are disagreements in this part of the world among the countries, generally, the Israeli government, the Western governments will benefit. I think Iran wants to deprive outside powers from benefiting from these disagreements. Iran wants to reduce disagreements that may exist between the countries of this region.
The Kuwaiti Emir is on his first ever visit as head of state to the Islamic Republic of Iran, seeking to strengthen his country's ties with Tehran. Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmad Al-Jabir Al-Sabah is heading a high-ranking delegation that includes his country's foreign, oil, finance, and commerce ministers. The Kuwaiti leader arrived in Tehran on Sunday and was greeted by Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif. Upon his arrival, the Kuwaiti ruler was escorted by President Sheikh Hassan Rouhani to review an Iranian honor guard. The two respective heads of state then held talks on numerous issues related to bilateral ties and regional issues including terrorism, extremism, and growing instability in this part of the world. Rouhani described the Kuwaiti Emir's visit as a turning point in relations between Tehran and Kuwait. For his part, the Kuwaiti Emir said that all Islamic countries should unite and cooperate for the benefit of the Muslim world. After the talks, 6 agreements in the fields of economy, tourism, transportation, customs, and security were signed between both Kuwait and Iran. Observers here in the Iranian capital, Tehran, view this visit by the Kuwaiti Emir as a highly strategic one. Now, despite the fact that he represents his country, Kuwait, his country is also part of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab League. This means that he can play a big role in mediating ties between Iran and its biggest competitor in the region, Saudi Arabia. Reporting for AEE TV, Hussein Dabash, Tehran.
Political analyst Imad Abshana spoke to AEE, and he said that the visit by Kuwait's Emir to Tehran is a landmark move in establishing better relations between Iran and the Persian Gulf states.
Only those leaders who have extremely good relations with Iran can meet the Iranian leader, and while meeting the Islamic Republic leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, means that Iran and Kuwait have opened a new chapter of extremely good relations, which will lead to better relations between Iran and countries in the region, especially Arab countries in the Persian Gulf, because there were some information that Sheikh Sabah also proposed. As Iran believes and also Kuwait believes, the security in the region cannot be fulfilled except if all the countries in the region cooperate with each other. And Iran has such a deal with Oman, and this deal with Kuwait helps in fulfilling and the security in the region. Also, Iran proposed to the Kuwaiti Emir to have the same deals with Iraq too, because Iran has the same deals with Iraq, so that all the countries in the region have security deals with each other, and deal with the problems in the region between each other and not let the foreign countries interfere in the problems in the region, because as we all know that the foreign countries will not let the problems in the region get solved, because they want to stay in the region and they don't want to leave the region.
Meanwhile, the chief of the UN nuclear watchdog has welcomed Iran's commitment to November's nuclear interim agreement reached between the P5+1 and Tehran, describing it as a step forward. In a report last month, Yuki Amano revealed that Iran had so far stuck by its agreements with the IAEA and implemented all recently agreed measures, as talks continue with Western powers in a bid to strike a permanent deal by July. At least 20 people were killed and several wounded as heavy fighting continues in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi between the armed group Ansar al-Sharia and irregular forces loyal to the former army general Khalifa Haftar.
In the latest round of fighting between Islamists and Libyan troops loyal to an ex-general pressing an offensive against jihadists, at least 20 people were killed in the eastern city of Benghazi. The clashes began after Islamists, including Ansar al-Sharia militants, attacked an airbase belonging to forces loyal to renegade General Khalifa Haftar. The Libyan Air Force retaliated by launching airstrikes on the assailants. The airbase and the Special Forces unit in Benghazi have thrown their support behind Haftar, who last month launched an offensive against Islamists accused of repeated violence in the city. For Al-Qaeda, the ex-army general is an enemy of Islam, and the extremist group in the Islamic Maghreb urged Libyans to fight Haftar and his so-called national army. Meanwhile, Libyan authorities have denounced Haftar as an outlaw. The former general, however, has won over units from the regular army and air force and remains intent on crushing terrorism in Benghazi. A sign Libya remains in turmoil 3 years after the NATO-backed war that removed former dictator Muammar Gaddafi.
Houthi fighters have taken more ground in their fight against the Yemeni army. The recent advances have resulted in the country's president threatening to launch an all-out military campaign against the Houthis. Our correspondent in Sana'a, Mohammed Al-Attab, has the details.
For a fourth consecutive week, Houthi fighters have been making advances across Yemen. In the latest round of fighting with the Yemeni military, the Houthis have captured strategic positions in the Amran Governorate, namely the mountain of Din, just 15 kilometers from the heart of the capital, Sana'a.
The battle in Amran is in its last stages, especially following the fall down of a number of strongholds controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood and Takfiri militants, who are now fleeing from their positions. Of course, the problem in Amran has resulted from the growing pressure on President Hadi after he took the reign of the country to allow Takfiris to take government positions in the region.
Sunday's clashes have left casualties on both sides amid ongoing campaign by Houthi fighters against the army's strongholds, which the Houthis accuse of backing the Islamist militant group belonging to the Islah Party, the Yemeni branch of the Muslim Brotherhood.
After the presidential committee resigned from its mission, fighting has intensified in Amran, and according to inside sources, the Houthis have controlled many military strongholds, mainly Dahain Mountain, which overlooks Sana'a. The injury of the 310 military commanders and the killing of one soldier have forced the government's interference with warplanes targeting Ansar Allah bases.
As the clashes reach the doorstep of the capital, reports say that the Yemeni President Abdurrabbu Mansur Hadi threatened to wage a full-scale military operation against the Houthis, who initiated their campaign against the government after it failed to hand over the killers of the Houthi protesters earlier this year. Observers say President Hadi decided to wage another war in the north in addition to the already existing campaign against Al-Qaeda in the south. Yemen would only slip into further chaos. محمد العطاب الاتجاه تي في صنعاء.
Well, the US administration is coming under fire for its recent decision to release 5 Taliban prisoners in exchange for an American soldier. Both the Afghan government and officials in Washington have condemned last weekend's exchange, saying it violates international law.
March 28, 1986.
5 for the price of 1. This is the cost the White House had to pay to get U.S. Sergeant Bowie Bergdahl back home.
I'm also grateful for the tireless work of our diplomats.
But the Qatar-brokered prisoner swap that saw 5 Guantanamo prisoners exchanged for the only U.S. soldier held by the Taliban for almost 5 years has caused a lot of controversy, both in Kabul and Washington. The Afghan government, who has been fighting its own war with the Taliban for over a decade now, protested that the deal contravened international law, which prohibits handing over prisoners to a third country.
If the United States of America moved these 5 people without a previous agreement with Qatar and limited their rights and freedom, this act will be considered violating all international norms, which state no government can transfer citizens of another country to a third country as prisoners.
Meanwhile, similar criticism was leveled by U.S. Republican lawmakers who warned that the Taliban members could return to the battlefield and pose a threat to Americans abroad. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, however, played down the suggestions.
Well, first of all, we didn't negotiate with terrorists. As I said and explained it before, Sergeant Bergdahl is a prisoner of war. That's a normal process in getting your prisoners back. That's first. Second, as to your bigger question, we are dealing with terrorism and hostage taking all the time, everywhere. I think America's record is pretty clear on going after terrorists, especially those who take hostages. And I don't think what we did in getting our prisoner of war released in any way would somehow encourage terrorists to take our American servicemen prisoner or hostage.
The 5 influential former officials of the Taliban regime will remain in the Qatari capital for a year. Their monitoring and a travel ban will be put into effect, in a move that the White House says has sufficiently mitigated any potential threat. This latest move comes as U.S. troops prepare to leave Afghanistan after 13 years of war. Washington has defended the prisoner swap, saying it could be a new opening to an agreement with the Taliban after talks broke down in 2012.
Here's a recap of our top stories. Syrians gear up for the first multi-candidate presidential elections, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. Mahmoud Abbas hails the end of Palestinian division after swearing in a new consensus government. Ongoing clashes in eastern Ukraine between Kiev's troops and pro-Russian activists leave a dozen people dead. And a visit by Kuwait's Emir to Tehran opens a new chapter in relations between Iran and the Arab monarchies in the Persian Gulf. Well, that's all from me and the Literature News team. Until next time, goodbye.